In the spring, he arrived back in Persepolis, from where he'd set off east 7 years before. He walked through the burned palace of the Persian kings, destroyed at his orders, and with hindsight he regretted what he'd done. After all, he was the king now. He was now wearing the robes and tiara of the Persian Shah. He could no longer be a mere conqueror, a seeker after glory. Now he had to rule the biggest empire the world had ever seen. And Iran was now the center of his universe. He still had great plans, among them to conquer the West. But fate, or the will of the gods, was closing in. There, suddenly, after a massive binge, his dearest friend and lover, Hephaestion, died. Alexander was almost suicidal in his grief. "Others loved me because I was king," he said. "Hephaestion loved me for myself." The bazaars were rife with rumor. Some spoke of poison, that the king too did not have long to live, that the omens were against him, that he'd lost his sense of purpose. The legend is still told by the traditional tale-tellers in Iran.
تمام دنیا زیر نگین اسکندر آمد، اما یه رو اسکندر اومد جلوی آینه همچی کنه، دید موها سپید. یه روز اسکندر دید حالش داره منقلب میشه.
That last spring, he moved back into Iraq. Now, obsessed with every omen, the king dithered while his soothsayers argued over the flight of birds. The signs, they said, were plain. He must not enter Babylon. Till now, he'd never ignored the gods, but now he did. By the banks of the Euphrates, after another heavy drinking session, the king fell ill. The wounds, alcohol, grief had finally taken their toll. Imagine the claustrophobia of the palace, the hanging gardens with their forest of palms, the somnolent heat of the river. There's a diary of those last days. It's one of the most dramatic records in history. This is the account of the king's last days. It comes almost word for word from the royal diaries. On the 29th of May, he slept in the bathroom because he was feverish. He spent the next day playing dice. 31st, he bathed and lay down in the bathroom, listening to Nearchus tell the story of the return of the fleet from India. On the 1st of June, the fever grew more intense. He had a bad night, and all through the next day, his fever was very high. 5th of June, they moved him to the other side of the river. There he slept a little, but the fever did not abate. The Macedonian veterans now believed he was dead and pushed their way into the palace to see him a last time. The motive in almost every heart was grief and a sort of helpless bewilderment at the thought of losing him. Lying speechless as the men filed by, he still struggled to raise his head, and with his eyes gave a look of recognition to each individual as he went past. On the 10th of June, towards evening, he died.
O Vasiles Alexandros, O Lord
After 20,000 miles, our journey was over. It ended where it began, in the shadow of Mount Olympus, the home of the gods. Alexander's search for eternal glory was cut short, and ever since he's carried the weight of an unfulfilled destiny, the hero who flew too close to the sun and whose wings were burned. But today the verdict of history is harsher. A man broken in the end by the loneliness and insanity of absolute power. Is that how we should see Alexander's career now? As a self-destructive madness rather than everlasting glory? I'll tell you what I think, for what it's worth, having followed in his footsteps for this far. And that is that all the evils unleashed by men of war in our own time teach us that we should reject Alexander's ideals. But Alexander was a man of his time, not of ours. He believed in the gods, and he would have accepted their verdicts, both for good and ill. If he could answer us here now, I'm sure he would say, like the tragic hero that he is, "Let the gods be my judges, for in every sign that they gave me, they told me no lies."
Ο Βασίλης Αλέξανδρος